Hello there. Happy Thursday. I'm recording this right around dinner time on Thursday. For those that watch on YouTube, as you all can see, I am back in my own home down in Richmond, Virginia. I have just been gone for, I think, 6 days at this point. I went up to Northern Virginia on Friday, flew out to Florida on Saturday, came back from Florida on Tuesday, stayed in Nova for 2 nights, and now I'm officially back in my house. I tried to get an episode up yesterday, right before I went to the Motley Crue Def Leppard Poison concert, but I guess Megaphone was not agreeing with me for some reason. That's just ridiculous. And again, I apologize for being a little more MIA than normal. I usually, I always have 5 episodes a week. The fact that this week's probably only going to have 3, maybe I'll have a bonus on Saturday, definitely displeases me. So I apologize for that. I've also just been going through some personal stuff the last few days. I don't like, obviously I'm not going to talk about that on this podcast, but that's also been, affecting my mental health a little bit. So, that's that on that. But, I have, my job here is obviously to talk Penguins hockey with you all. And we are going to do that for today's show. Mike Matheson season review, a potential UFA target that a listener asked me about. We're going to go into his numbers, see if it would make sense for the Penguins. And we're going to end the show with a discussion on the Stanley Cup FInal, as we could only have one more game left in the regular, for this season, So that's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. So let's just jump right into it. Again, we are almost fully through the season reviews now. The last one for the defenseman is Chris Letang, even though I've talked about him so many times throughout the offseason and during the regular season. After that, I'll get to Mark Friedman and a couple of the other players, the other forwards, that, that came up from Wilkes-Barre, get into their numbers a bit. And then we'll be fully done with the season reviews. But, Mike Matheson, this was, I think, his best season to date, not only as a Pittsburgh Penguin, but as an NHL defenseman. Played almost 1,300 minutes, 74 games at even strength. When he was on the ice, the Penguins had 53.6% of the shot attempts. That's the best overall number for his career. He was at 53.9 in 2016, but he only played 3 games during that season, so I'm not really going to count that. The Penguins had 55.6% of the actual goals for at even strength. That is also a career high for him. 54% of the expected goals, another career high. 55% of the scoring chances, another career high. 54% of the high danger chances, again, another career high. 53.2% of the high danger goals for. That's the third best of his career. He also shot 8.7% this year. And he had an on-ice save percentage of .921. So he was getting pretty good goaltending when he was on the ice. And, these numbers are really good. There's no other way around it. I mean, this was by far his best season as a Pittsburgh Penguin. And, there have been people in my mentions on Twitter and, listening to 93.7 The Fan, which, I sometimes do when I get bored, even though I probably shouldn't, because the hockey talk on there is pretty miserable, to say the least. I think most of the people on there really have no clue what they're talking about. That's just, except Adam Crowley. I will always love Crowley. He's hilarious, to say the least. I would go on his show anytime if he asked me. But get back to what I was saying. And a lot of Matheson's success comes at the expense, well, not even the expense, just comes because of his deployment. Mike Sullivan found a pairing that worked for him, and he put him in the best position to succeed. When Matheson was putting up bad numbers in Florida outside of his transition stats, it was because he was playing too high up in the lineup. Sure, part of it is coaching. I mean, Tar Reardon has always been known as a very good defensive assistant coach. But I definitely think a good chunk of it was playing, too many top pairing to top 4 minutes. And when he's playing those minutes, he gets gas and and he makes mistakes. And when you saw him play with Chad Ruhwedel throughout this season, those mistakes went down. And it was a perfect pairing for so many reasons. He can be the guy that drives offense on that line. I've had this saying on this podcast for a while now. In my dream defensive pairings, I want one guy that can drive the offense, and I want another guy that is still okay offensively, but is better defensively than the other player. That way, that player can, cover up for the offensive defenseman that sometimes takes a chance in the offensive zone, comes back the other way to hurt them, and he can make a good defensive play. That's my dream kind of setup for a defensive core. And at least on this pairing, it's a perfect third pairing. Matheson, he's great at carrying the puck out of his own zone. He's basically a one-man zone entry machine at this point. Had a heck of a shot this year. I'm just making sure on the numbers. He had double-digit 11 goals at 5v5. That is a career high for him. Before this, his career high was down in Florida 2019-20 when he had 7 goals. He's perfect for what he is. He's a serviceable potential top 4 to a third pairing defenseman. Does he make a lot of money? Yeah. But at the end of the day, he puts up good counting stats, and his underlines are really good. And going back to the pairing there, as I said, with him driving the offense, that also allows Chad Ruhwedel to not take as many chances in the offensive zone. I guess that's the B part of why it's such a good pairing. And he can also cover up for Matheson when he does inevitably have a screw up, because he has those quite often. I should say. He's the total chaos player, and a lot of times it works out, a lot of other times it doesn't. We got the bad version of him, I think, in the playoffs when it was probably 3 to 4 pucks went off his skate and into the net, and it was just like, man, like what is going on here with him? But I couldn't be more thrilled with how he played this year. My biggest gripe with people when it comes to this player is overvaluing him. So many people have just said, oh yeah, he can take Chris Letang's minutes really easily. They don't need to go out and get someone else to replace Chris Letang. They have his replacement in-house. And it's like, you watched Matheson for one year have the best year of his career, and it's like you completely forget about how he played the first 5 seasons of his career in Florida, and then the last season in Pittsburgh, where he was kind of just okay. They really didn't get the return on the investment, in the Patrick Hornquist trade like they did this year. I should say that, but he's never going to be Chris Letang, and for those that think those are not actual takes out there, I've had people say that on my mentions. I've seen radio hosts in the city of Pittsburgh actively say that during the playoffs when they were playing the Rangers, that, oh yeah, Matheson's, his breakout makes it easy to move on from Letang, and it's just like, no, it does not. He takes those minutes and the team suffers. Say at least, maybe the power play is still just as good because Matheson's always been a good power play quarterback, but 5-on-5, who's going to generate those primary assists? Even the secondary assists, is he going to generate all those? Is he going to generate all the goals that Chris Letang scores as well? I just don't see it. So if he plays on the third pairing again next year with Chad Ruhwedel, I would be all for it. If you want to put him potentially on the second pairing, bearing some other moves from the defensive core, like a Brian Dumoulin trade or something like that, I think the Penguins can get away with that. But if that starts to go sideways and he looks to get a little gassed, then I would potentially move him down. But kudos to him. He had a great year. He's their second best. I would say right now he's probably their second best defenseman behind Letang, even though that gap is ginormous. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he plays next year. I don't think he's going to be moved. I think the chances of him getting traded are 10% during the offseason, especially with how he played. But was very impressed by him. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how Tar Reardon, does with him next season as well. So coming up In the next segment, we're going to get into that potential free agent target that a listener DM'd me on the Locked On Penguins Twitter account. And just so you all know right now, if you have any questions about, free agent targets, potential trades you want to run by me, silly season stuff, just let me know. Just shoot me a DM. I will gladly talk about this on the podcast. I still have until July 13th, to really talk about all this stuff. And, with there not being a lot of news right now, even though I still generate topics to discuss, that makes my life easier too. So if you all have any potential trades or, players you want the team to go after, shoot me a DM, tell me your reasoning, and, I'll look into it, and I'll put a segment out, or I'll spend a segment on a future episode talking about it. So just wanted to throw that out there for you all. But again, before we get to the next segment, from the people who invented healthy and tasty, here comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given coconut brownie chunk the Puffs treatment. That's right, the coconut brownie chunk Built Bar flavor you love in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling and listen. They are good for you. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and they're all delicious. The Puffs are only here for a limited time. You can go to Built.com right now to make sure you don't miss out. They are going fast because they taste amazing. All Built Bars are made with protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You can go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. So let's get to this potential target here. So Tyler Aaron, who listens to the show, shout out to you for asking this, by the way, Tyler. He goes, what are your thoughts on the Penguins bringing in Max Domi? I think that he would be a great replacement for Evan Rodrigues if we don't sign him, and I know that the Penguins are trying to trade for him in the past. Tyler, excuse me. You are right that the Penguins have shown interest in Max Domi in the past. I think it was under Jim Rutherford's regime that he tried to bring him in once or twice. I don't know if Ron Hextall's regime has shown interest in him. I don't really think when he was a potential trade candidate at this year's trade deadline, I don't think Ron Hextall's management was interested in him, but he fits the kind of player that Hextall and Burke would want. He brings the truculence, he's physical, drives to the net, decent goal scorer, decent playmaker. It's tough because I like him, but what is he realistically going to get? On the open market. I'm looking to see here what his contract was. Excuse me here. Yeah, so he made $5.3 million this season. If I can look up his counting, if I can just make sure I got his counting stats right in front of me here. 11 goals, 39 points in 72 games. He is not going to make $5.3 million on his next contract. That's just absolutely ridiculous to even suggest that or to think about it. That number is probably going to come down. If I had to guess, maybe he'll ask for 4 to 4.5. I think the Penguins could do it. It would make sense. But he is a left wing. That's the big thing. That's his main position. Could he play center? Maybe. But if we're thinking of an Evan Rodrigues replacement, I'd almost rather just, go out onto the free agent market and bring another center in that produces close to what, he did this year, because Rodrigues actually outperformed Max Domi this year. Rodrigues, 19 goals, 43 points in 82 games. He is going to be due a pay raise, and I would prefer the Penguins keep him over Domi. Now, regular season wise, after the Hurricanes got Domi, he started actually putting up decent numbers. Scored 2 goals in the 19 games. When he was on ice, the Carolina had 61% of the shot attempts. They had 75% of the actual goals, 56.4% expected goals rate, 53% scoring chances rate, 53% high danger rate. He was on the ice for 1 high danger goals against. He shot 9% overall. So of his 11 goals, 9 of them came at 5v5 this year. But before he came over from Carolina, he was struggling down in Montreal. 46% shot attempt rate, 50% actual goals for, so that's not super terrible, but 45% expected goals rate, 43% scoring chances rate, 43% high danger chances rate. I think part of that does have to do with him playing on a really crappy team. But, is he as good as the version of him that we saw in Carolina? I probably don't think so. I think the answer, when you look at, his Corsi percentage and his actual goals for percentage and his expected goals percentage, and his scoring chance percentage, I think the answer for both of those, I think it's somewhere in the middle. So say, for example, shot attempts rate, I think it's probably for a full season around maybe 52, 53%. Expected goals from 45 to 56. I think that's probably somewhere from, 50 to 52%, scoring chances for rate, maybe around 50% as well there. I do think he brings, positive, things to this team. Again, he's physical. He brings that truculence that Burke wants. He can score the greasy goals in front of the net, decent playmaker, fine defensively, but, can you do better than him on the open market? I think so. And I think the Penguins are going to potentially want to go out and make more of a splash if they have the cap to do it. Now, if they don't have the cap to do it, and they may not just because of how cap strapped they already are, I could see them potentially signing Domi, but, that's all if, Hextall actually shows an interest in him. Remember, there's going to be a lot of teams going after this player. Free agency, there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no sure things in free agency. A player like that is going to have, my guess, up to 8 to 10 suitors. And rightfully so, son of Ty Domi, he's had a lot of expectations when he came into the league. He's been a good player for, I think, most of his years that he's been in the league. His best year, I think, came in 2018-19. Excuse me, when he was with Montreal, had 22 goals, 31 total assists. But again, right now he's not worth a 5.3 million. If you can get him for maybe 4 million, I would consider it. But he is a player that I would not want to overpay for. That's for sure. That's the biggest thing, because also in free agency, agents love to drive the prices up. That's, even last year, did Ron Hextall probably want to pay Brock Begin $2.75 million for 4 years? No. Did Jim Rutherford probably want to pay $3.5 million per year for 6 years for Brandon Tanev? No. But that's the business of doing things in free agency. Most of the time, the team is not going to get the friendly deal. It's the player that's going to get, what he wants, because, he wants to get, what he thinks he's worth. And, that's the whole purpose of testing free agency. You want to see, what teams interest in you and, what teams think of you, especially from an AAV standpoint and, of course, a term standpoint. So, I'm a little mixed on it. If the Penguins were to sign him, again, I would hope that the contract is not for, 4 to 5 years, something like that. If you can get him for maybe 2 to 3, $4 million per, I'd potentially think about doing that, but I'm not interested in paying him, to say the least. I would rather have Rodrigues back as the center, or just on the team in general, over someone like Domi. So those are my thoughts on that. Tyler, thank you so much for asking that question. And again, y'all, if you ever have a player that you think the Penguins should go after, send me a DM. I'll talk about it on the show, and I'll plan out a segment for it. So this was fun to talk about, Domi. I have plenty more free agency stuff coming for future episodes on this podcast. So stick around for that. And of course, I do have some draft things coming in the very near future. Coming up in the final segment, I'm going to get into the Stanley Cup FInal and just some thoughts from Game 4 overall, and why John Cooper really needs to stop whining, to say the least. But that's all coming up right after this commercial break. All right, I'm back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. I'm trying to make sure here that I did not see another silly season thing. No, not right now, but I think I might have to scroll all the way back in my DMs. I think I had something that came up about a week or two ago, but I'll get to that for probably Friday's episode. Anyway, so Colorado up 3-1 right now on Tampa Bay. The Lightning are on life support. And the word right now in Tampa Bay, they're still pretty mad about what happened in Game 4 with the Nazem Kadri overtime goal. I have no idea why they're so mad about it. I mean, the player is basically at the bench. That's not they will never call that too many men call. Sorry. I mean, I can probably count the list of times I've seen that called on one hand, and I've been watching the NHL for 20 years of my life. That just, it's such a, and I get what John Cooper's trying to do. He wants to work the officials. He remember he did that after the game when the Penguins beat their butts down in Tampa Bay. He said, it's funny how the Penguins really never get called for anything, and of course that's going to stir up the conspiracy people and all this stuff. And I think the memes started going around with Cooper and all that, and whatever. But he gets no sympathy from me. The amount of breaks that the Lightning have gotten over the last couple of years, to even go back to back is nothing short of a miracle. I mean, for God's sake, I may get heat for saying this, but they played the Montreal Canadiens in the Stanley Cup final last year. Like, I don't need to have you sit here and tell me that, well, my team didn't get a break with this. I mean, sorry, maybe you should have won the game in regulation or in overtime, or you shouldn't have gotten boat raced by the Avalanche in overtime. But, right now I'm seeing a very tired, fatigued Tampa team. I think it's going to be very hard for them to win 3 in a row against this juggernaut Avalanche team. They are 15-3 in the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. I mean, this is probably one of the best runs I've ever seen to a potential Stanley Cup in my lifetime. If they finish this off, I think it'll go up there with the 08 Red Wings, the 2012 LA Kings, and the 2016 Penguins as, probably one of the 4 best teams to ever win during the salary cap era. I mean, they forechecked the Lightning, into utter HE double hockey sticks. Andrei Vasilevsky did all he could last night. I mean, he was putting on one heck of a show, but you got to beat him that 4th time. That's been a thing that no one's been able to do since the Blue Jackets did it in 2019. Can Colorado finish them off here? The ball arena in Denver is going to be rocking. Avalanche haven't won a cup in over 20 years. I can't wait to see that scene in Denver, and I hope they play all the small things and all that. It's just, it gives me goosebumps, honestly, every time I hear it. And, obviously, if the Avalanche do win the cup, I'll dedicate a segment to what the Penguins can learn from that going into next season, if they can take anything away from what the Avalanche did. Can the Penguins, can they build, the roster, I guess in a mini similar way. Obviously, you're not going to have the next Kel McCarr coming through your pipeline, or, probably have a Valerie Nichushkin just, going to break out for his best season of his career. But, I still think there will be things to take away if the Avalanche do finish this off on Friday night. But, they're such a treat to watch. Kadri coming back and being the hero, for as much of a stain as he is, he's definitely grown on me during these playoffs. And that was one heck of a goal to get the game winner there for Colorado. But, the series is not over yet. No one, I don't think, can ever really count out Tampa Bay. So, they're going to put together, I think, their best performance yet on Friday. And, we'll see if the Avalanche will be able to match that, to say the least. I think that will do it, though, for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I appreciate all of you for listening to this one. I, again, apologize for being kind of MIA over the last, 5 to 6 days with vacation, a couple of, personal things going on with my life and the concert. It's just been, bad stuff galore. But I promise you all, the vacation's behind me. The concert's behind me. I'm dealing with the personal things as I can, and I will continue to try to deliver, some of the best Penguins content out there for you all on an everyday basis until the podcast goes to 3 days a week. So again, thank you all so much for listening to this one. Let me know what you all think about Mike Matheson's season. My grade is probably an A for him. Let me know what you all think about Max Domi potentially joining the Penguins in free agency. And let me know, do you think Colorado ends this in 5 on Friday, or do you think Tampa Bay will have one more last stand to try and defend their championship? But again, thank you all so much for listening. I'll be back with another episode for you all on either Friday morning or Friday afternoon.